Good afternoon / good morning, everyone, depending on where you are in Tennessee. And Charlie, do you want to go through your introduction of who you are, and I'll keep an eye on the waiting room and make sure we get everybody let in?
I guess. So I'm Charlie Martinez. I'm an assistant professor in the Ag Econ department at UT, and I'm also the farm and financial management specialist with UT Extension. And I help on the side in terms of research with livestock, finance, and then now, due to David Bilderback and Liz, a lot more dairy stuff in my research portfolio now.
We were forcing him to be dairy, and he's doing a very good job.
Yeah, I like it. Don't tell my beef friends, but I like it.
What beef friends? We're never getting you back, so. All right. I am also going to throw something into the chat box. Hopefully all of you can see it. For those of you who would like Master Dairy credit for coming here today, I do need y'all to fill out a completion report. I can see some of your names, but a lot of you have things like an iPhone or a home or something like that, which makes it really hard for me to equate that with an actual person. So I'm putting a link into the chat right now for y'all to go fill out just a post-completion survey. The only things I have to have from you are your name, whether or not you need Master Dairy credit, and which webinar you attended. The rest of it is the same standard things that we would do in person, where I give you some opportunity to give us feedback on what you liked about Charlie's talk, what you hated about Charlie's talk, and he's really going to appreciate all of the feedback as well. So if you can't see the chat, that link is https:// what is that called? / tiny.utk.edu/ww2021. And I'll also send this out in the post-meeting follow-up. So if you registered for this meeting, which you had to because you're here, you'll get that link again in your email later today. And with that, Charlie, take it away.
Awesome. Make sure this thing works before I forget. So today we're going to talk about what I'm calling round 3 of CFAP. Technically, we've had 2 programs already, CFAP 1 and CFAP 2, and this was labeled as CFAP 3, but in reality, it's more of redistributing some policy and money back in the different programs to either go back and touch a little bit on CFAP 1 or help reopen CFAP 2, and we'll go through that a little bit here. At the very beginning, it's going to be more wordy, and I apologize for that. As a bad economist, I also got to include some wordy slides in here that has a full description of what each part of this round of CFAP is. I won't touch all of it, but it's there in case you want to read through it, or if you need a slide deck from Liz, I'll be happy to send that to her. Basically, coming back from the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021, that's what's essentially is the CFAP 3 round, but it's basically put into 4 parts, and you can see them listed there. Part 1 is about investing $6 billion to expand health and assistance to more producers. Part 2 is adding $500 million of new funding to existing programs. Part 3 is carrying out formula payments under CFAP 1, 2, and CFAP AA. And then Part 4 is reopening CFAP 2 sign up to improve access and outreach to underserved producers. And so as you can see right there, there's not really a new CFAP 3. It's more of another round of monetary distribution to help with other programs that are existing or to help develop other programs. But in general, the Secretary of Agriculture made a comment here, and that's that first bullet point, that this is meant as to be a part of a large effort to reach a greater share of farming operations and improve USDA pandemic assistance. And so essentially what that means is through these 4 parts and using the Appropriations Act of 2021, they realized that there were some people that didn't capitalize on the opportunity or didn't know about it in time. And so they're trying to go back out and try to solicit more participants and applications to these programs. And we'll get into it for each part. As again, I apologize, I put this at the very beginning. This is a very wordy part about the $6 billion that's going to be spent, and it covers certain things there. One, the euthanized livestock and poultry. It was highly publicized during the supply chain issues that there were some swine having to be euthanized because of supply chain disruptions. The same thing with the poultry side. And so they're going to go back and try to help those producers. They're also going to look at biofuels, specialty crops, beginning farmers for local, urban, and organic farms, cost of organic certification, or continue to add to conservation activities. And the next one is the first part of what I felt was dairy producers could, that's for dairy producers. And it's the expansion or corrections of CFAP to support dairy or other livestock producers. And we'll kind of get into that a little bit later on. Also the PPE equipment that was purchased throughout the supply chains for each industries. They're going to go back and try to help, reimburse money for that. And then also they want to look at improving resilience of the food supply chain. I remember roughly middle June, early July is when it was just publicized that, are we going to have enough meat, or are we in a shortage? People were dumping milk at the very beginning of the pandemic in March and April of last year. And so those supply chain disruptions, the USDA realized that that's an issue. And so they're trying to figure out a way to counteract that, and that therefore in the future we wouldn't have these kind of problems. And then so they're also going to develop infrastructure for donation and distribution of perishable commodities. We saw that in the second round of CFAP, where they were trying to redistribute production from agriculture to the urban areas. And then the next one that I really think, it kind of highlights the dairy side of things was support and assistance for dairy farmers through the dairy donation program or other means. It says directly, it verbatim, it says other means. I do not know what other means. Say that 5 times fast, but I'm assuming that they're going to try to attack or to utilize programs similar to dairy donation program to facilitate agriculture production to the inner cities, and therefore it's not so much of a waste that occurred. The next part, or the second part of it, was $500 million of new funding to existing programs. And so the 8 big ones are listed there. The first part is $100 million of additional funding for specialty crop block grant program. So that's more specialty crop based. Another $75 million for farmer opportunities and training and outreach. And they're kind of highlighting and emphasizing veterans, beginning farmers, people that are underserved, stuff of that nature. The third one is $100 million to local ag marketing programs. And this one kind of sticks out to me for the dairy folks. They're talking about value-added programs. And I know here in Tennessee, we've been doing business plans, meeting with producers about trying to add a value-added segment to their already existing dairy operation. So maybe that's something there that we can look into for dairy producers here. But also they're talking about local and regional markets. Another $75 million is going to the Gus Schumacher Nutrition Incentive Program. That's more research-based stuff that that they want to put stuff in there for. Another $20 million for the Animal and Plant Health Inspection Service. So that's APHIS, USDA APHIS, and they're the ones that do research and try to help prevent animal disease outbreaks, and also whenever it does occur, what kind of response do we have? They're also putting in another $20 million for Agricultural Research Service. I am an Aggie, and don't hold it against me because I have no idea what they're working with A&M on in terms of the critical intersection between responsive agriculture. I don't know anybody at A&M right now that's currently a part of that $20 million. So if anybody has a question, David Bilderbeck, I have no idea why A&M is getting $20 million on that part. $28 million going to NEFA to provide grants, and that's more for state departments of agriculture. And in there, what they really are wanting to highlight is farm stress assistance programs and research in that area and grants in that area. And then the last bit is roughly whatever's left over of the $500 million after we've taken out all the rest is approximately $80 million in additional payments for domestic users of upland and extra long staple cotton. Of course, when the pandemic hit, less people shopping, we had less trade happening for cotton products and textile products in the world markets. And so this is a way for them to try to help those producers or the domestic users of those products. And so as we get into part 3, this is where we actually start seeing some payments for our producers. The very first part is that they're going to go back to the well of CFAP 1 And if you remember, if you participated in the livestock side of things for the cattle part in CFAP 1, there was a payment from the CARES Act. There was a payment from the CCC part. And if you remember correctly, it was broken into the CARES payment was for your inventory part, and the CCC was for whatever you've sold during during the pandemic, whenever prices weren't that great. And so what they're going to do is actually go back to the inventory side. And I know some dairy producers have beef cattle herds, and so they're actually going to go back to your CFAP 1 application, and they're going to see the amount that you have on inventory, and they're actually going to go back and pay for the eligible commodities at this much per head that you see there listed, and that's straight from the CFAP website. You're going to get it automatically. I know for me personally, my family, and some of my friends back home in Texas, they received a paper at the beginning of April talking about that you would be receiving another payment. And so in that, you would also know that we don't have to do nothing if you already have a CFAP 1 application. There's nothing that you have to do on your end. That it was going to be done automatically by the end of April, and it was only for CFAP 1 approved applicants. And so if you got payments from the CFAP 1, you're going to get another payment. Probably, I know some folks have already gotten some payments, but at least through by the end of April, you're supposed to already have your CFAP 1 payment. And if you're unsure, if you have questions, I would reach out to your FSA office and just touch base with them. And if you haven't gotten a letter or anything like that, try to figure out what's happening. Maybe something's wrong with your application or something of that nature. You definitely want to get that fixed. Along those same lines, I know some folks have already received a 1099-G form from the government, and this might be counterintuitive to talk to dairy producers in terms of government programs, but livestock people, sometimes they get government money or government support, and they don't realize they need to keep that 1099-G form and make sure it goes on your Schedule F. And so I know I'm talking to dairy producers they know those how to fill out Schedule F like the back of their hand probably at this point. But just remember that you have a 1099-G coming from the CFAP 1 payments, and this next round of money that's coming from this act is going to you're going to get another 1099-G form next year for the money that's coming from this round of CFAP 1 payments on this round 3 of CFAP 3. Additionally, whenever we talk about the crop side of things, I know some of our dairy producers, they do row crop and sell row crop commodities. There's going to be an additional CFAP assistance of $20 per acre for producers on eligible crops as CFAP 2 flat rate and price trigger crops. And in that, I think the one that stuck out the most that probably would apply to our dairy producers is corn. The corn commodity is applicable here, and it has to meet a minimum of 5% price decrease. And inside the law, it talks about the week of January 13th through the 17th and July 27th through the 31st. If there was a 5% decrease there, which they identify it was, you're eligible for that payment via Part 3 of this third round of CFAP assistance. So kind of looking back real quick before we go forward, this comes from the CFAP 1 dashboard. So as you can tell here, we had $84.7 million given out to cattle producers here. And so some dairy folks, like I mentioned, do have beef herds. That number is going to increase probably or undoubtedly here. And so also the total amount is going to increase as we get more money put into that fund or the CFAP 1 fund for our cattle producers, as well as our dairy guys that are our dairy operations that actually also operate a beef herd. You're going to get it automatically. Again, it's only for CFAP 1 approved applicants. And again, that's your payment rate for each eligible commodity given your inventory that you supplied on your application for CFAP 1. Additionally, they have estimated that with this amount going back to CFAP 1 nationally, they're expecting this to put another $4.5 billion give $4.5 billion to cattle producers, which they estimated it's roughly 560,000 producers nationally in terms of money going back to producers. The second or the fourth part of everything was that CFAP 2 is going to be reopening. And so they've reopened it on April 5th. So we're on April 14th, so day 9 of that. And so they guaranteed it for another 60 days from April 5th. There's no set deadline in terms of when they're going to close that. We just know right now that there's only 60 days, that if you need to reapply for CFAP 2, or if you didn't apply for CFAP 2, you can go back in and talk to your FSA officer and try to get that squared up. In terms of dairy operations, their dairy operations applying for CFAP 2 must be in business of producing and commercially marketing milk whenever you're applying for CFAP 2. There's a caveat to that, and I'll talk about that here in a minute. But how does milk apply to CFAP 2 was that it's a price trigger commodity, which again, it has to suffer a 5% or greater national price decline in a comparison of the averages from the week of January 13th through the 17th and July 27th and 31st of 2020. And cow milk is eligible for CFAP 2 as a price trigger commodity. It might not apply here too much, but if y'all have friends that are also in the dairy milk, the goat milk sector, they qualify for CFAP 2, but it's not a price trigger commodity. It's more of a sales-based commodity. And there's a chart on their website, on the CFAP website, as to how much in percentages and how much money you get back based upon your sales. And so on the milk side of things for CFAP 2, the producer's total actual milk production from April 1st, 2020 to August 31st, 2020 is multiplied by the payment of 1.2 per hundredweight. And the producer has to have the estimated milk production from September 1 to December 31st of 2020. And that's based on the average daily production from April 1 through August 31st. Multiply that by 122, and you multiply that by $1.20 per hundredweight. Again, that's kind of it was the same one that they had used earlier, just different dates that apply now to the milk payments. And this, we talked about CFAP 2, and so what I wanted to pull up was, what did CFAP 2 generate for us over here in Tennessee? And as you can tell, cattle again brought in another $52.35 million off of CFAP 2 program. Corn was at $27.98 million. Sales commodities, which would be something kind of like a goat milk type commodity, brought in $24.14 million. And then as you can tell as you go down to milk category, there was $4.7 million that was generated from dairy producers and the applications that were put in for the CFAP 2. So again, we got a pretty substantial amount there for the CFAP 2 program. That's more than the CFAP 1. If we remember how much was on the CFAP 1, it was like right around $132.5 million is what we got in total from CFAP 1. And so obviously CFAP 2 has been way more in terms of total amount of dollars that come to Tennessee. And although milk was less in the total amount from that program, we've gotten a lot more here in the state. And so if we put it all together, for the CFAP 1 and CFAP 2 so far, here's what we have in estimates before we get the next round of the CFAP 3 that hits our economy here. We've had $132.5 million brought in so far from CFAP 1. Again, the cattle side of things, they're actually going to get more money put in there. 7.9 million of that came from dairy producers, and there was 170 applications for CFAP 1. We did see a decrease from 170 to 156 applications for CFAP 2. And when we talk about CFAP 2, we brought in 158.1 million here in Tennessee. And of that, again, it was 4.7 of that was for the milk payments. And if we sum it all together, we've had $290.6 million brought in from these two programs already to Tennessee. And then we've also had that amount, we've had $12.6 million brought into our milk producers here in Tennessee. And working with David Bilderback on our dairy gauge benchmarking program so far, through the dairies that we've seen, obviously the government payments was really high from last year. And, that's to be cognitive of that. Hey, we did make more per cow, but be wary of, or be cognitive of the fact that some of that did come from the increased government payments of the coronavirus, the CFAP 1 and 2. So moving forward, if you're in terms of production, just kind of keep that in mind. I know I've heard David say, we'll never see this again, but it's always, maybe we will, maybe we won't. Just depends what happens on the Hill in DC moving forward with more coronavirus assistance. And so kind of bringing all that back together, we've talked about the third round of CFAP 3, or what we're calling round 3, what I'm calling round 3. And it's not really too much in terms of, hey, we're going to get extra money, but here's more eligible commodities, or here's what the bill is going to help give out more money. And then also, of course, outside of all that, we held all the programs that they're putting more money into for research and extension, outreach and stuff of that nature. But what I wanted to bring it to, so Iris, I don't know, they still have to apply. It's not automatic enrollment. I would suspect that some people went out of business, and thanks for reminding me about that, Iris. Within this, we'll go back for a second. You jogged my memory. Within this part of the second round of the milk payments, or CFAP 2, if you actually did go out of business in the last third and fourth quarter of last year, there is a prorated amount that you are still eligible for. And if you remember back, I said that you have to be in operation. Well, if you went out of business in quarter 3 or 4, you were still technically in operation, and therefore now that you can apply for CFAP 2 again, even if your operation was only going for a couple of weeks, you still can get a prorated amount of extra government payments that was due to you due to the operation. So one, not automatic enrollment. I would suspect that maybe there were some people that went out of business, because if you look at it, we still had a high number of producers still enrolling into the program, Iris. So I would suspect that some people were going out of business. Maybe some people they reached their limit, or they decided they didn't want to. I know some beef producers, the second time they said, I don't want to enroll. They just felt like they were doing okay. Good question, Iris. So bringing it back, we've talked about, we've had these government programs that are meant to offset the disruption of the price due to the coronavirus. And so when I say that, these payments are not meant to be a supplemental income, but more of an offset income that was due to the disruption that happens in the markets. But what I want to highlight is that with these programs, they do still have a bottom line impact on our income and our farmers' income here in Tennessee. And what you're looking at here is proprietors' farm income in Tennessee, as far back as the data will allow me to go. And this comes from the St. Louis Fed department there, or Fred, or however you want to call it. But from 1950 all the way to 2020, you can see how over time we've had a lot more variability happening in our farm income here in Tennessee. The highest point obviously was here. That's actually quarter 3 of 2013. And that's when some commodities were really hitting it good, and coming off the heels of 2010, 2011 in the row crop side, and then also rolling into the cattle industry when you could take a 300-pound calf to go get $1,000. And since then, we had a drastic decline, a sharp decline over a relatively short amount of time. And as you can tell here, around this time, and I'll blow it up here in a minute, this is where the pandemic started occurring, and that's that yellow mark. So any of these gray marks is technically a recession. So here's the recession of 2008 to 2010 that we saw in the housing bubble and all of that stuff. But if we blow it up, this point right here of quarter 3 of 2018 was the lowest of the history that's been recorded so far on this income. So this point right here is this point right here. And so that's a negative $573.6 million in terms of income, total income at that time. And since then, we've made an increase all the way back up to actually the last quarter of 2020. We've actually increased to a positive $234.2 million. And right here is where our quarter 1 starts occurring of 2020. And as you can tell, we started having a drastic decrease as the pandemic hit in. But then in quarter 3 and quarter 4, when we started getting all these CFAP 1 and CFAP 2 payments, obviously they've helped in terms of reversing the curve. Obviously, it's not all due to that, but obviously it's helped in a way. And if we start looking at it, the change per quartile in the millions, quarter 1, we were at negative from quarter one to quarter two, we dropped negative 46 million. From quarter one to quarter two, from quarter four of 2019 to quarter one of 2020, we were at negative 46.5 million. Then we dropped even more by 116 million between quarter one and quarter two of last year. And then when we started having these CFAP ones and all these PPP loans and all the assistance that was out there, our producers did a good job of utilizing that. And also it helped us regenerate and help move that curve back going upwards in our farm economy. And we, as you can tell here, quarter four, we saw a big increase of 427.6 million. And so when we start thinking about, we know where we are as an economy or as the farm income, and we start thinking about this round three of payments that's going to start going out, we are going to see another increase of this from the CFAP 1 just because of the cattle numbers that we have here. They're going to get more money that way. And so that there's also going to be another boost from that. CFAP 2, even though it is reopened, I would still say the jury's out just because most people that were in CFAP 1 were in CFAP 2 from a state standpoint. And we also got a lot more money in CFAP 2. And so I don't know how much more there is in CFAP 2 for our state, given the fact that we did utilize it a lot here in the state compared to other states. And so I would say, we're still probably going to get a bump from CFAP 2, but probably not as much. I have there some DMC numbers there. It just got reported for us. When I say DMC, if you don't know what I'm talking about, the Dairy Margin Coverage Program. In 2020, whenever it was closed, we had 47% of operations enrolled, and that gave off an estimated amount of $951,000 in payments. And so that also goes into the farm income that going to the last graph that I saw there. But something that I really thought was encouraging from just the economic standpoint was that I felt like some of our producers realized the risk that was out there. And so in 2020, we've gone from 47% of operations enrolled to 55% operations being enrolled, and that's going to give off an estimated $1.4 million in payments from the DMC coverage is what they're estimating right now in this year. But it's very encouraging that whenever our producers saw risk and realized that that's an issue, not only do we do a good job of dairy producers taking advantage of the CFAP programs and the PPP programs and stuff of that nature, but also the programs that are offered by USDA and the DMC, for instance, we've seen an increase in that. And so that can also help offset some of the risk moving forward. And for me, that's very encouraging for our producers to recognize that, we can offset some of the risk. And I know if we look at commodity prices right now, the cost of feed is kind of high right now. There's a lot of uncertainty moving forward in terms of what's going to happen in the fall with schools reopening and the milk demand and stuff of that nature. And so, it's very encouraging though to see, producers saying, hey, I can utilize this program. I'm going to use it. And so I would expect our farm economy to start, not necessarily dipping down back to where we were in 2018. But I would, I'm not going to say that we're going to keep increasing as much as we were just because these programs like CFAP 1 and CFAP 2 are not going to always be there. But I think that we're minimizing our risk by having producers enroll in things such as DMC. And so I don't think we're going to shoot back down, but we could probably start staying on the positive side in terms of our farm economy and our income here in Tennessee. And so with that, I know usually we get an hour here, but I didn't want to take up an hour. No one likes sit and listen to somebody talk for that long. And so, if you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them. If not, that's my email. That's technically my office phone there. I'm obviously not in my office too much still currently because of restrictions and stuff. But if you need to get a hold of me, you can email me. If you're on Twitter, that's my Twitter handle. And with that, I will stop sharing or take questions, whichever you want, Liz.
If anyone has any questions for Charlie, or if there's anything else that you'd want to ask him about, please feel free. I guess, Charlie, one of my first questions, and you did cover it, but just for my brain, so I make sure that I know, everyone does need to reapply. And would that be the same process as before, talking to your local FSA?
Yes. Yeah, just reach out to your FSA. I know if you applied the first time for CFAP 2, and you have an application with them already, like we do personally, I reached back out to my FSA officer back home in Texas and said, hey, we have an application. Do I need to do anything? And they said, no, you're good to go unless you want to amend it. So maybe there you've realized that you left some stuff on the table, quote unquote. I would reach back out to them with any questions. And then also because they've adjusted some of the other commodities, some dairies that have other like value added sides. And if you have a value added segment in your business, you might be able to qualify for some of the value added type products that are out there on the assistance side. But if you have any questions, FSA, they're the one. Unfortunately, sometimes you call them and they're bombarded, but they're the only ones that can really do anything for us now, as in terms of producers being able to get anything filled out.
So you talked a little bit about DMC and PPP. Are those enrollment opportunities open right now? Are they closed?
I think the PPP, the second draw PPP, is still open. But if I know there's some people, there's been confusion out there about PPP second draw versus first draw. Producers can still apply. Yeah, this is still open. They can still apply for PPP, but it has to be first draw. If you have never had a PPP payment already, or if you have not enrolled into that program, you're going to be put into the first draw category. And if you've already had a PPP, if you've already been enrolled and you've already done quote unquote first draw, you're then qualified for the second draw. And there's actually some different restrictions for the second draw versus the first draw. And it varies upon, the size. They decrease the limit in terms of how many employees that you could have, And then also there's some other like underlining restrictions that occur, and it's more individual based at that point.
And what about DMC?
I believe that closed already.
Okay. We have a couple of larger operations that have either requested access to this or going to be looking at it later. Can you refresh our memory on what the procedure was if you were a multi-generational farm or a multi-site farm?
Internet cut out. What'd you say?
Oh, can you refresh our memory on what kind of the guidelines were if you were multi-generational or like a multi-site operation?
So that also that they've changed some of the restrictions. You're talking in terms of PPP?
PPP or CFAP. I remember there being some things for both of them.
They adjusted it, and I can't remember. I would be lying if I told you one way or the other, but I know there's an adjustment on the second draw versus first draw, and I can't remember off the top of my head. And so I'd be lying, but on that part, producer can probably Google like the new adjustments to the PPP second draw, and you can see that. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I don't want to say something and it be wrong. So I would rather a producer go, and if you have a question, you can ask your banker, or you can just Google the second draw PPP, and that'll show you the differences in terms of what has changed between the two.
Thanks, Charlie.
No problem.
Anybody else have any questions for Charlie?
Aaron Smith
May
sent
31st.
an email out saying that May 31 was the new deadline for Triple P.
And if you know some producers that are still they're not sure if they qualify for CFAP 2, I would, if you're an agent, I would just tell them, you can go to the USDA CFAP website and it will show each eligible commodity, and then from there to fill it out. It's still relatively streamlined, and you can do it with your FSA officer pretty quick. So I would recommend if anybody knows producers that haven't enrolled, you might as well just keep in mind, if it's their first time ever getting a government payment, it is a taxable source of income. So just keep that in mind as well. I know some folks were kind of caught off guard with the CFAP payments.
I'm sure glad that UT finally hired us another dairy economist.
Me too.
I don't want to know how much David had to pay you to say that.
Well, they might still be in the same room, so David might just have to meet and tell you in a second. But I'm not seeing a whole lot of other questions. So I am going to throw that information for the follow-up survey in here again. Just give me 1 second. Clearly I haven't been drinking enough water today, y'all. Throat's getting tired.
Allergies.
Yeah,
Allergies
that
this year.
too. So again, that website that y'all will be going to is going to be tiny, the word tiny, .utk.edu/WW2021. And that will count as your sign-in for today. Just as a reminder, all I really have to have is your name, whether or not you need Master Dairy, and which webinar you attended. But we always like to hear how we did. So please feel free to give us feedback as well. And Charlie, excellent job as always. We really appreciate you. And if you're okay with it, I'll send out your slides in the follow-up. And if there's any other sources you want to share as well, so like a link to that USDA webpage or anything along those lines, I'd be happy to send those out to our participants too.
I'll get it to you right after this.
All right, thank you. All right, y'all got off easy today. He only kept you for 40 minutes.
Yeah, sometimes that's a good thing.
Sometimes that is a good thing.
Principle of parsimony.
As David always likes to tell us, we need to be concise with our econ talks. So I think that's absolutely fine. But thank
And
you,
it's
everyone.
lunchtime.
Do it.
And it's lunchtime.
Yeah, well, if we go a little bit too short, they might have to go back to work sooner. So, that could cut days. All right, everyone. Christine, you are correct. So since we had a change on the webinar schedule, this one is not on the survey. Give me 5 minutes and I will fix that. And if you've already filled it out, just let me know which one you clicked and I'll go back and fix it. But thank you, Christine, for bringing that to my attention. Knew I forgot something today. All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye all. Thank you.